him that if Biden looks really slow and bad on the uptake in this debate that's coming up this week, if he performs as badly as some people expect it is, there really might be an actual movement to pull the plug on him.
Brothers and sisters, friends, I see some enemies.
But hopefully I can have my bearings a little bit more going into this storm. So
And the storm being 24,
well,
25. Yeah.
yeah, well, I mean, just first of all, I see what's crystallized now is that, well, Gallant is here today, talking about full-scale war with Lebanon. Then Netanyahu is coming to speak to address Congress. I see this as a historic event in the history of U.S. Sort of anti-Zionist movement, or just really in world history. To have this war criminal and this incredibly horrific slaughter that's going on. Coming over to here to have these guys and women, jump up like seals and applaud him. Right. And then we have the debate, and then the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee, just up the street. Yeah. And then the DNC here, and then the election. And the past 3-4 years, I've been thinking, well, we're not seeing those Trump pickup trucks and the Trump trains and driving people off the road, and all that shit's coming back, though. Right. Yeah. So, and then Gaza pops up. So, for me, I'll try to cut shortly here, get to the point where I can ask you a question. We can start officially the interview. But, for me, I had never had voted in any election ever, until I voted for Biden 4 years ago. And that was after careful consideration and, 4 years of busting my ass in the streets, trying to get masses of people out to, force the regime from power in one way or another, as you know. Right. So I feel like, I knew it was nothing, for me, it was nothing more than to acknowledge that we might need to have a popular vote victory of a margin of 3 million or 5 million versus 1 million or 2 million, because that's going to get disputed. So it doesn't matter what I do with the Electoral College in Illinois, but I'm going to go out because they're on the cusp of possibly consolidating fascism to a higher level in this country. We see what they're trying to do, what they're aiming for, even though everyone else is still sort of sleeping through it. And this is the tactical move, to make. So I went ahead and voted. And then, of course, the one time I vote, I shouldn't be surprised, but a U.S. president commits genocide, and I didn't expect to get anything out of it other than maybe this time to recover for the next round. Yeah. But to see the empire kick into gear on October 7th and October 8th, and the way that it did with the bear hug, and just straight into empire mode. All of the media, all of the politicians, including Bernie Sanders,
I remember that,
standing in, falling in line, and it felt like, to me, I made one comment, said that's 9/11's 9/11. I mean, if Israel's calling it their 9/11, this is going to go way out of hand. So anyway, it's brought this question, to the fore again about 4 years later. Now all the people that we were out in the streets trying to just get them to acknowledge the F word might be a possibility. Now they're the ones saying, well, if you don't vote for Biden, we're going to have fascism. Right. So there's this vice that they put you in, and I have you could put a loaded weapon to my skull, and I would never pull a handle for either of these two people, and Biden, what he's done to the people of Palestine and Gaza in particular, there's no way I would ever vote for for him. Of course, Trump, I still feel the same way about the guy. So, we get into this frustrating binary scenario where people say, well, if you don't vote for Biden, then, it's going to be your fault. We're going to have fascism. And they're telling people like me and you who have been trying to get people to acknowledge this reality for sometimes decades, So reading or hearing your article or your podcast about why you're telling people, how should I say, why I'm not telling people to vote for Biden. Why is this different now, 4 years later, And I wanted to talk to you about it because I feel very much have the same viewpoint as you, but you brought up some points that I thought were interesting that I hadn't thought of. I thought of them, but not in the same way, like the 4-year cycle and, specifically, and how we don't have time for this nonsense to be waiting, every 4 years to do what, look what's happening around us as we speak, and the world is just literally burning up.
Right.
1,300 pilgrims died going to visit Mecca, and it's here now. The climate catastrophe is now. It's happening now. And I wanted to hear, with that long preamble, I wanted to hear some of your thoughts about this election and the sort of binary approach to it that either, here's the reality. It's either one or the other. And then so you choose. And if you don't choose, then this is that. And then you have, the third party, vote for the third party. Then the third party people start coming up what is Jill? First of all, Jill Stein, the system's going to let Jill Stein ascend to, the heights of the president of the White House. And then they're going to allow, Greens or progressives or social democrats to, free the means of production and socialize society, So I just feel, I feel lonelier actually than I did 4 years ago. I feel like we're a little bit like I don't have quite a place. So I wanted to talk to you about your feelings about that.
Well, I was at something protesting one of Biden's fundraisers on the North Side last fall. Big Palestinian solidarity movement. I was there with some Refuse Fascism people and some RevComs and I don't know, some other folks. And someone came up to me and said, "You fuckers sold out in 2020. You said vote for Biden." And the response to that, and it is true. A lot of people broke form. A lot of real radicals, revolutionary communists, and others broke form in 2020. I've never voted for a Democrat before either. It was the same kind of thing. 2020 was different in different ways. But here's something to keep in mind. I always say to folks when they bring that up. If you had fucking joined us in the streets and driven out the Trump-Pence regime the way it was supposed to have been driven out, the way that horrific right-wing governor was driven out of Puerto Rico, Ricky Rossello, with a mass movement in the streets, then we would not have had to resort to the bourgeois ballot box to try to prevent a consolidated, horrific second Trump regime. And by the way, I'll tell you one of the parts that fed my sense of why we needed to vote for. People forget about this. That was COVID. The guy was just a maniac on COVID, and COVID was nowhere near done by the fall of 2020. It was ramping up, and it had a whole life, and hundreds of thousands of people died in through the winter, and even after the election. And I was really horrified on a very, very specific conjunctural kind of way around that issue. So that's one of the things that made that convincing to me. But if we'd driven him out the way, and if we'd driven him out the way he should have been driven out, it would have set a whole new set of terms for politics. That it was the way we wanted Trump and Trump-Pence out of there. What was meant to be a gigantic social movement beneath and beyond these little moments in time, these 2 minutes in these holy voting booths once every what is it, 1,460 days? Figure it out, 365 times four. They tell us that that's politics, that's all there is. So, I mean, I think that's worth bearing in mind. I was in Iowa. That's where I was registered, and that was already lined up. I tell you why I nonetheless thought the popular vote mattered, because it was very clear, and I think this is true in 2024, 2025. These elections are going to be now struggled over all the way into the next year, and then literally into the whether the electoral college certificates are accepted and whether the guy is actually inaugurated. So there's a whole many-sided political conflict over that now, all the time, and there will be. And in that political sense, just who had the most popular vote might actually be a factor. I mean, it might actually matter. So I thought it actually mattered to try and, now this time there's some irony involved, I think, in not in what I argued, and what I think a lot of people of my own political orientation are arguing this time. There's an irony in saying don't vote this time. And the irony is that Trump is arguably worse this time. When he came in 2016, he had Bannon and maybe the Mercer family whispering sort of fascist nothings in his ear. And he had no idea that he was actually going to win. And he was surprised that he won. And then he was so gobsmacked about that all these establishment Republican elites were gravitating towards him and wanting to be around him, and he almost couldn't believe it. I mean, that's gone this time. This time, he's taken over, and Trumpism has taken over the entire Republican Party. Every kind of non-Trump Republican is gone. I mean, it has become a fully fascized Trump dear leader fucking party. It's just incredible. And there's no more of this letting establishment Republicans in there. There will be a loyalty test, and you don't even make it into his cabinet, and you don't even get endorsed by him. And this time he's gonna weaponize the Justice Department 100%. I mean, this is, this is like, so now we're saying don't vote for him. And this time, whereas in 2020, he like presidents do, he carried the weight of how horrible things had become during his term. And in his case, that meant the decline of the economy under COVID, and also the his horrific response to the George Floyd rebellion. And it looked like he had a very strong chance that Biden would win. And this time it looks like a very strong chance that Trump will win. I mean, he's leading in the 6 contested states that preposterously, absurdly, idiotically determine presidential outcomes. It's down to, because of our electoral college system from the slave owners in the 18th century, it comes down to a handful of contested states. And he really may win. And so, people kind of look at me sideways and go, wait a minute, you voted this way in 2020, but now you're against it. Well, it's a little complicated, but I think that when you make a break from who you really are because of extraordinary circumstances and argue for lesser evil tactical voting once, that's one thing. And you remember the argument. We need some breathing space, some breathing ground, and then in which supposedly we were going to form a revolutionary left, right? Which is going to, we'll get out from under the grasp of fascism, and we'll form the great radical movement that we need. Well, that didn't really happen, did it? Breathing space was a really big term for me at that time. Breathing ground. That was, we meant breathing ground for the fascist boot off our necks. But literally with COVID, it was killing people. People were not able to breathe. I mean, that COVID thing for me, the people that, the people that we're thinking of, like the Revcoms and Refuse, I don't know if they talked all that much about COVID in this context. So that's a bit personal from my angle. I was really hung up on Trump's COVID policy. I even coined the phrase pandemo-fascism at the time. I thought the guy was actively spreading it. It was intimately related to his eugenicism and his racism and his white supremacism and his social Darwinism and all of that. But this time, Biden, there's nothing mysterious about the horrors of Joe Biden. Now he owns the stench of the American empire to a degree that I don't think either of us really fully expected. And, not just in Gaza. I mean, I'm horrified by the fact that he can't he's never been able to pick up a telephone and talk to Vladimir Putin. I'm no fan of Vladimir Putin, but the funding of this insane endless meat grinder of a war in Ukraine is probably the main thing, along with climate change, that led the bullet of the atomic scientists to push their doomsday clock closer to midnight than it's ever been. Biden just blew through warnings, not just from Noam Chomsky or Mearsheimer or Bob Avakian or any radical intellectual, but from establishment Cold War thinkers like George Kennan and the CIA director right now, this guy Burns and Henry fucking Kissinger. They said, don't do this. Don't. 5 words to Putin, or to have Zelensky say it, Ukraine will not join NATO, and hundreds of thousands of people wouldn't be having amputations and walking around in prosthetics in Ukraine, and all that. And by the way, Ukraine, the hypocrisy, the blatant hypocrisy of all these tears over the invasion of Ukraine. And do not get me wrong, Putin's a criminal, and it was horrific. He's committed horrific war crimes in his invasion of Ukraine. All all these tears and in concern for I sound like I'm making fun of it, and I shouldn't. What happened to the Ukrainians is horrible. For white European Ukrainians, and rallying to their support with weapons, and to the point of being ready to tip the world towards nuclear war with Russia on one hand, and then when the Gaza genocide starts, to side with the invaders and with the killers and the racists, when the victims are brown-skinned Muslims and Arabs and all of that. It's just the world sees this, and it makes the world sick. That this is very commonly noticed throughout most of the planet. This preposterous seeming double standards, but to take the Chomsky reminder, it's actually not a double standard. It's a single standard. What serves U.S. What is perceived as in the interest of the American empire? What are strategic American imperial interests? Roll back Russia, always defend Israel, which is a key imperial asset, not just in the Middle East, but in the whole planet. Israel has been interwoven in with the American empire for a long time, and so we see that crime, that horrific hypocrisy, and that dangerous imperialism. Biden's not just some previously kind of laughable vice president and the senator from the credit card industry in Delaware, who says buffoonish shit and has idiotic videos about corn pop, where he a video where he told a story about that. I won't go any further. The corn pop story. It's
Yeah,
just
no, no.
insane, right?
We'll do another episode on corn pop.
Yeah, and now this guy owns hundreds of thousands of deaths in Ukraine. He owns God knows how many deaths through genocide, rapid death. Like the assault on Gaza that he got behind, that he hugged Netanyahu, and that he pretends to be concerned about it going too far, which is even worse, because then he continues to just send in arms. It'd be better to just be open and honest about it, like Trump would be, right? I mean, well, I shouldn't say that, but the crocodile tears and the pretense of humanitarianism, and then writing more checks. They just said they just signed off on F-15s, in 2 years. So they're just showing that we will continue to be their sugar daddy. By that time, how many will they have killed? 100,000, 200,000, 500,000, whatever. Now he's really a known quantity as a blood-soaked warmonger. On top of which he just outdid Trump with an executive order rolling back asylum rights. He has all this. Oh, he pays attention to climate science, and Trump doesn't, and questions. Well, that's nice. And then he continues to let record amounts of gas and oil out of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, and signs off on a drilling project in a previously pristine part of Alaska, the Willow Project, and we're setting new records for energy use, and the climate continues to, collapse. So we know
Well,
all
not to
that.
mention, sorry, but not to mention these two wars and what they're doing to the environment and to the climate,
Well, yeah, right. And then he's antagonizing China in ways that are profoundly reckless. And so, the problem is, fascism's a real problem, but fascism is one of the crises that capitalism has brought into being. And the climate thing and an imperial war thing are just moving too quickly. We can't, for us to continue Bob Avakian has this interesting analogy for the electoral process in the United States. He calls it like quicksand. He's got a couple analogies. I always went with sheepdogging people into the electoral process or Judas goading them into. Judas goading is when you the Judas goat leads animals up the a plank to the killing floor and slaughterhouses. But actually, I kind of like quicksand, and I like also siren song, from Greek mythology. This 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 message that we can't seem to resist, and that we get sucked into this quicksand every 4 years, and everything stops, and everything revolves around this big money, major media, corporate crafted, quadrennial, once every 4 years extravaganza and spectacle. And they tell us that's politics. That's the only politics that really matters. And you sort of look back on your life and you see you just it going by, and the human species falling further into potentially irreversible catastrophe as we focus on these once every 4 years, savagely time staggered dramas in which we are induced to walk into little confessionals, voting booths, and make marks next to names of horrific, narcissistic egomaniacs who serve concentrated wealth and power, right? And who are selected in advance for us by um by the ruling class of this country. And I think to myself, I kind of like the RevCom slogan right now. No fascist Trump, no genocide Joe. The whole damn system's got to go. There's a slogan I kind of like.
Yeah, I've used something very similar to that. Um,
I mean, I've said on Facebook, I think, or somewhere, a system that gives you offers you the so-called democratic choice between a fascist maniac and a blood-soaked butcher. That's a system long past its overthrow date. It's used by date. Let's put it that way.
yes, this is to me. This is a decrepit, dying empire. I mean, when you look at this, this is supposed to be the peak of humanity, like the greatest, most powerful empire. Of course, it's in decline, but still, right? Modern society, and this is the two. These are the two best characters that they have to offer up to lead, the population of this
Oh,
country
it's
into the
mind-boggling.
future. And I think if just going back to my first election would have been Dukakis versus Bush. And I was following politics before that, before I turned 18, and I followed Mike Dukakis when he was governor of Massachusetts. And I saw that Democrats were like, they were like the B team. The Republicans were the A team. They were like the stars. They were the jocks that got the cheerleaders and stuff like that. And then every once in a while they'd fuck up, so bad that the coach would put the B team in, who would play by the rules and pass the ball and, use better technique and stuff like that, get them back in the game and then bring the A team back in. And I just kept seeing at this time, I noticed, I mean, I was young, but how much they put Dukakis in this tank, and he was a small guy and he had this big helmet on and he put him in a tank to show that he was tough. I was
Oh,
concerned
no,
about
no.
El Salvador, Nicaragua, Guatemala, Honduras, what was going on in Central America, what was going on in South Africa. And in all these places I'm looking into them, I'm finding where the guns and all the gun running, the coke, everything's coming from Israel in the US,
Oh, yeah.
And so, and I just see this Democratic Party trying more and more to be like Reagan, to be like Bush, to get tough on crime, to start throwing black faces out there and calling them, implying that they're criminals and getting tough on cocaine. And so before I even came time to vote, I just said, you know what? If that's the opposition in this system, then the whole system is rotten and needs to go. There's no need for me to vote for
Yeah,
this
I
or
remember
that.
Sheldon Wolin wrote a book, oh my God, it must be 15 years ago, called Democracy Incorporated. But he keeps referencing the Democratic Party as the party of inauthentic opposition.
Right. And it just
And then
kept
you see them when
going.
they get in power. Look at the Clinton administration, the
Right.
Three Strikes Bill, He passes NAFTA. He tears up basic family cash public assistance. He deregulates Wall Street, and the whole thing. Yeah. Um, and we got Biden in there, right? And some of my comrades said, "Well, I guess you can vote fascism out of power." There's a sort of a moment of like, wait a minute, we were calling for removing him through the streets, but we got him out with the ballot. Not really. Fascism has continued to march on. It's drawn strength. The other party has purged whatever non-fascist elements it had in it. There's 25 red states, some of which are openly challenging Biden right now on the border issue. Uh, um, I'm referencing Texas. They have the whole goddamn Supreme Court, and that's thanks to our Constitution and our whole screwed up 18th century system. And they gather strength from. See, the fascists never stop. That's one thing about them. They don't accept loss. They don't accept defeats. They don't accept jury verdicts. They don't accept that. It's just grist for their mill. It just proves the globalist communist conspiracy against them. And now and Biden waited so long to appoint a special prosecutor and move forward on a prosecution of a guy who literally tried to physically overthrow previously normative bourgeois democracy in this country. And now they're going to debate him? I mean, seriously. I mean, it's like, I grew up in the 1960s watching TV shows, with Nazis. There's all these replays of World War II. What do you do with fascists? You eliminate them. You shoot
I know.
them. You don't fucking debate them, for Christ's sakes.
I contend that we're still in this equivalent of like the post beer hall putsch phase. Right. They keep relying on their systems, which makes sense. This is their system, and they're invested in this, so they're relying on their institutions. But like you say, it gives them more fuel every time he gets charged with a felony or gets convicted. His donations increase by millions, and the Democrats, they're going to just keep that. This is why I wonder, like, when is the point where you say enough is enough with this system? And I think that something that's different now that I tend to forget. I just turned 55 to it's okay. It's out there. You could look it up anyway. But anyway, the youth today, they didn't come up with the evil empire. They didn't come up with it doesn't matter. We're all going to just die in a nuclear war with the Soviet Union anyway. It's a whole different paradigm. It's now the earth is literally burning up, and they're seeing this empire in action and how it just went into auto mode, and they're seeing this absolute slaughter on their phones, just, those that are willing to look.
That's right.
And they're saying, wait a minute, you talk about this and you talk about science and you say we have to do this and we have to act this way and we're moral and this is what's going on. That doesn't match. And they're still going on with the gaslighting like it's the same empire as it was under Teddy Roosevelt or whoever. Right. And so there's an opportunity here, but I also, it's just, I think as goes Gaza, so goes the world, because you have here a situation with the most oppressed people on the planet, and have been in that scenario even before October 7th, facing up against the most powerful empire in the history of the world with their attack dog in a cage, locked in, being starved to death. And it's really a microcosm of what I see when I walk up to the grocery store here in my new neighborhood, which is a lot of tents, a lot of people living in tents, a lot of migrants here with babies that have nowhere to go, that have no food, that have no shelter, that are leaving countries that have been decimated, destroyed, dominated, ruined by U.S. imperialism over the past number of, couple centuries. And they're coming up here to try to survive, to get away from the heat, to get away from literally burning up to death. And I just think that we're at this juncture in human history where are we going to treat our brothers and sisters that are, internationally as disposable pieces of garbage?
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, which the way that we're headed, because it looks like what they're doing in Gaza is that this is just not willy-nilly decisions that they're making.
It's
You know,
quite
this is
chilling, isn't it? One
yeah.
of the fears that I have is that this fucking genocide is as visible as it is. And at one level, you're thinking, wow, this is powerful. We've got these images and we can use them to fuel protest. But the other thought that I have in my head sometimes about it is they are readying us for the normalization of this. I mean, I've had to turn away from even like mainstream media screens. There are whole families just buried in rubble. I mean, are you kidding me? Children. I mean, and you'll even see it on the PBS NewsHour, right? Where they'll put up a picture of three generations, all of them gone. And you think to yourself, how in the hell are not all of us in the streets every second of the day until this kind of horror ends? And I think with youth that you were referencing, I think these images out of there, I've had some sort of unpleasant conversations with older friends of mine, the people that are even older than me, which means they're really out of the 60s. Like people who were like in SDS and were in the Chicago, got nightsticks up against their head at the Chicago Democratic Convention and all of that. That's would be people well into their 70s, in some cases 80s, particularly an old friend of mine in DeKalb, Illinois, that they're all pissed at kids because they don't get it, that Trump's a fascist and they've got to get behind Biden. They've got to suck it up and get behind him. And I say to them, these pictures that they're getting over their phones, these horror pictures, try and remember how you responded when those photos came out in Ramparts magazine showing that young girl naked running down a road away from a napalm attack, and you decided that you couldn't hold your nose anymore, and you weren't going to vote for LBJ in 1968, and you joined the New Left, and you went toe to toe with the cops and security personnel and National Guard and all of this kind of stuff. The lecture's not working on these kids. They a bunch of them, and I'm really proud of them, and it's really neat to see. I kind of with this is a time I wish I was back in a classroom, and I would have loved to be at DePaul and help defend some of those kids and stand up for them, because I've seen some real courage there. It's really, really knocked me out, and to see a lot of the Jewish kids out here at the University of Iowa, some of the leaders are Jewish Voices for Peace, and they're fed up with this shit. And they're not. The lecture ain't working on them. They've seen too much, and they connect a lot of different things. They connect police violence with Israel. They know that American police forces cross-train with the Israeli fascist forces. They connect it to the to the environmental crisis, and they know very well that I'm going to live 15 more years or 20 more years where they have to deal with the collapse of livable ecology for 50 more years. And you know yeah, it's all interrelated to them, and they're not real excited about capitalism these days when they're looking at these fucking student loans that they're going to have to spend the rest of their adulthoods being indentured servants to paying off and stuff like that. God love them.
Yeah,
Good for them.
yeah, it's not all of them, but I'm I'm wondering
Right.
how is this going to play out in the future, because I look at my generation. I'm in Generation X. This generation uh, completely failed humanity for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
it's over. So, someone has to make this break, and it is the capitalist system. It is the system, the very nature of the system that is driving this death march, this mass suicide event, mass extinction event of humanity on the planet.
Right.
So that's, again, that's
Because of its inbuilt anarchy.
yes, it is. If it makes a profit, then you do it. If that means, destroying the planet, then you do it. But if it, those are the rules
And
as
we're
the
and
endless.
we're confronting the fact, this is something Avakian says that I like. I think he said it about the right to eat, but I would add it, I would extend the narrative to the right to decent clothing, shelter, and to health or health care. But Avakian used to have this rant, maybe he still has it, I don't know, that there's no right to eat under capitalism. And that's actually true. I mean, could you if you could imagine, a social this fantasy of a Bernie Sanders or a Scandinavian style social democratic government somehow miraculously getting past all the obstacles and being elected president. And the guy would go on and have a face-to-face with the country and say, I proclaim from this day on that you have a right to eat, you know? And then, okay. And so, yeah, and people start showing up at grocery stores and you know, where the foods, you know, cost too much. And they go, and they have a food basket of necessities for their home. And they go, well, that'll be $175. And they go, well, I only have 80. And that well, I'm taking it anyway because, you know, the government says I have a right to eat. Well, the whole fucking supply chains of competitive anarchy, you know, capitalism, would just collapse. Or say alternatively that you actually got you know, you actually got a government in that provided food for everybody, and that provided health for everybody, and that provided decent shelter and clothing and cultural resources for everybody. Well, then why the fuck would people go out and spend, you know, the lion's share of their working hours renting out their labor power, doing often mindless and ridiculously stupid, socially counterproductive, environmentally lethal tasks, right? To get money to then run back out and buy the stuff that was given to them. You know, it's just there. Capitalism just can't allow that, and it is. I think you're right. It renders people disposable. It dehumanizes them. It dehumanizes them right down to the labor process that they engage in. It de-skills their labor power. It throws people out on the ash heap just regularly, and it still does. And these kids are confronting that. I think they're going to see that now. Whether there's going to be a revolutionary movement in place, and whether they're going to hatch one, or whether there's going to be one that they can glom onto and infuse and bring their passion to and expand, well, that's a matter of human agency and creativity and imagination and hard work that I can't claim to have adequately contributed to that. That's a hell of a thing, you know. And yeah, you know, there's a lot of arguments with elections. There's always, I used to get caught up on these arguments. What would be better for the left, if a Republican's in or a Democrat's in? And there used to be this argument that when a Democrat's in, then everybody sees that the problem with the country isn't just that the wrong party's in power, i.e. the Republicans. They see that they're more likely to see that the problem is the system when the supposedly liberal and left party isn't. That's very instructive. Well, but I mean, is that the way it really works? I don't know. Or does everyone just get depressed and demobilized?
I think that's happening right now, actually.
I
But
think maybe some of that's happening. But all those arguments about which way if it's better for us if the election goes this way or that way, none of it matters if we don't have real radical revolutionary organization and consciousness building and in some place to take advantage of it. One can argue about the tactical advantages either way, but you know, Lenin's "What is to be done" was not a blueprint for a socialist society. It was an argument for the importance of organization, and there's an organization deficit. And a lot of it has to do with how messed up the left itself is. It doesn't feel the need to have revolutionary organization, and the sights are very low on most of the people, on the part of most of the people I know that identify as left. I've had 3 people send me Facebook things about how I'm supposed to be like super excited because some Starbucks workers got a collective bargaining, got union recognition in Mississippi. Well, I mean, you know, I'd rather work in a unionized place than in a unionized place, but that ain't no revolution. And guess what? Capitalist climate change is probably going to wipe out coffee in the next 20 years. So, from what I've been reading. So, you know, we gotta aim higher, and we got to think about the whole system, like you're saying. What you're saying is the mode of production's got to go.
but you know, I was just saying these when we look at the election and the politics that I know I ran into, you know, I got to figure that some of these people are just too comfortable. I mean, because
Yeah.
you know, you talk about the pandemic, and really it was this normalization of this incredibly traumatic event, you know. And for me, the pandemic, I mean, I got it twice or whatever, but it didn't affect me physically so much, but it decimated my little living that I made beforehand. And along with a lot of other people, I haven't really been able to recover because coming out of it, you know, you're hit with inflation and, you know, all kinds of shit. So that's the other thing is that in a way, the system has neutralized me to a certain point where I've had to focus so much on just day-to-day living, going to the food pantry and waiting in line for food, because I can't afford to fill up my car with gas to get me to my gig and food from the grocery store. It's just one, it's going to be one or the other right now. And I know that if I'm going through that, there's tens of millions of people
Oh yeah.
dealing with that.
Oh
you
yeah.
know so, and especially like in the hood, and in the most oppressed neighborhoods, you run into that all the time, where you may have somebody who they see the system in front of them every day, every minute, every day, but their question to you when you're talking to them about
Yeah.
revolution or organizing is, hey man, I'm trying to get something to eat, can you help me out with this or that? Right? So you have certain segment of the population, which by no stretch is really going to be relied upon as the backbone of a revolution, the kind of petty bourgeois or so-called progressive left, um, you know, and then this really downtrodden population, which is more and more, working poor and single moms and people who have to have three jobs, which is everybody, to survive. And then also on the left, you have, which we haven't mentioned today, but these people that you talk about a lot, the Trump and left, you call them,
Oh yeah.
or the people. I watch the Gray Zone and different shows on YouTube, and I hear these people like Mearsheimer, like you mentioned, and different analysts, and they don't see, they still see Trump as kind of like, it's almost like they want to like Trump because they see
Mm.
him as such a wrecking ball to the Democratic Party and to the neoliberal neocon imperialist system that we live under. But they really, I still feel, underestimate the fascist trend and the what was going on with Trump. We have to remember the first time around was a marriage with Mike Pence and the Christian right as well. I mean, he was vice president, and it
Oh
was
yeah.
this thing that
Yeah.
came together. And now I think as more as a movement as a whole, the evangelical Christian has grown closer and tighter to Trump. So maybe he doesn't need that one figurehead anymore. But you know, I think that the portion of the so-called left, again, they don't take the threat, and to me that's based in privilege and a certain sense of racism, and parasitism, I guess, in that.
I hear from Trump and lefts all the time, and they're almost always 50 plus white and male. And I hate to say that I hate to imply that worldviews flow completely from one's gender and demographic racial identity. But yeah, they don't see the shit that's going to come down on people of color, that's going to come down on immigrants and all that. And it's a real thing. You're talking about all the food thing and the gas thing and all of that. Biden can talk all he wants about how their overall consumer price index has been coming down and blah blah blah. That apparently there is some taming of inflation. This does not resonate with people when they go to the grocery store. Okay, the basket of the price of a decent food basket is just absurdly high compared to, I don't know, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 6 years ago. No, people can't afford to, young folks cannot afford purchasing homes right now, even middle class kids. The mortgage rates are too high. And and rents are ridiculous. We're in the middle of an eviction crisis right now. That's another reason Biden's is likely to lose. He owns the stink of all this, and he hasn't really done much about it, and he hasn't talked honestly about it. And this is consistent with who he was historically. Um, you know,
Yeah, it's not, again, it's not shocking or surprising in any manner. Again, well, on October 8th, I made a statement that said, Israel, they're going to want like at least a 10-to-1 ratio on this one. I was thinking in terms of the history of their mowing the lawn, and that
oh sure.
this was going to be a big one. And when they said it was going to be a long war, wow, I didn't know it was going to go 9 months. And to be honest, I did want to check in with you partially just because on October 8th, I completely checked out of cable news. Um, and since that date, I haven't watched CNN or MSNBC or PBS or
Oh,
anything.
I've found the news unwatchable lately. It's just horrifying. And yeah, to see them play along not only with the narratives and to just hit you constantly in the face with the Israeli victims, even though the Palestinian body count was going twice as big, three times as big, 10 times as big, 20 times as big, and to just continue as if we didn't know what happened October 7th to hit us with that. Then to portray, as many of the Democratic talking heads did, and as they did on PBS. When I'm in Iowa City, that's all I have is PBS. We can't afford cable out here. Um, to play along with the demonization of the student protesters. Some of these young folks we were talking about, who I think heroically rose up and put their bodies on the line and their careers on the line to express their moral revulsion about all of this, to play along with the line that they were all that they are anti-Semites and that they're anti-education and that they're disrupting, learning, and that they were all just like real big Hamas fans, which just isn't true. That's not the case, and that's demoralizing. Um,
Yeah, and I have that within my family. So,
oh,
uh, yeah. So yeah, that's what I've been completely, almost 100% focused on Gaza and the region. And I haven't had the stomach to follow along with the election and the general mass media in the U.S. But we're on the cusp of it. I won't be able to avoid it much longer. I do see important segments that are shown on other shows on YouTube so that I don't have to watch it,
it's a
but
little shocking as you focus on this election. It's a little shocking to me how bad Biden has turned out. He has really been played by Netanyahu.
yeah.
And Netanyahu could unelect him. And that's, I think, part of the chutzpah and this arrogance of Netanyahu is that he's counting on Trump's return. So his buddy coming back. And I think he's sort of helping bring that along. I think that's part of this visit. I mean, I think in some ways it's a Trump campaign visit. But Biden has performed horribly. He's not a very good imperialist. Supposedly the Democrats are supposed to be better at imperialism than the Russians.
I
This
think that
this
peer is,
Ukraine thing is not work is not a asset in the Biden record. It really looks bad, and he hasn't even been able to communicate reasonably across the new Cold War lines and negotiate some sort of end to this just endless fucking meat grinder over there, which is just horrific. And But Netanyahu's making him look pathetic. Even Nick Kristof is writing about it in the New York Times that
oh, he's playing them
he
so hard.
yeah, he just plays him, and Netanyahu just plays him, and they just disregard these statements that Biden feels compelled to make about holding back a little bit and being more judicious in your use of force to save civilian lives, and then we won't give you these weapons unless you behave. And none of it means a single goddamn thing, and the Israelis know it, and Biden loses. It's going to be no, it's going to be to his own fault to no significant extent. And I will tell you that Seymour Hersh, whose Substack I get, and he's a very interesting guy because for some reason, over the many decades, he's become this go-to fellow that people in ruling class and the establishment talk to. And Seymour Hersh's latest Substack had something to the effect that a high-ranking Democrat informs him that if Biden looks really slow and bad on the uptake in this debate that's coming up this week, if he performs as badly as some people expect it is, there really might be an actual movement to pull the plug on him to make something happen at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. And the two people that they're thinking about are, are your governor, Pritzker, who I assume is pretty awful on Israel. Just guessing. And the other one is the Newsom, the more telegenic, that's considerably more telegenic than
Oh,
Pritzker,
Gavin Newsom.
governor of California, Newsom. I don't know how much difference that would make, but it's
Come
not
on, man. Come on, Jack.
right. It's not unthinkable that and the way they say it would be done. It would be understood behind the scenes, and again, I have no idea. This almost sounds like conspiracy thinking here. That Biden would get a first round nomination, but would be prevailed upon to gracefully reject it and open up the process for the
Well, hey,
nomination.
they're putting it out there that democracy is on the ballot. It's all on the line. And then they're putting this guy out there, and Trump's campaign now is openly referring to it as weekend at Bernie's, and he's probably going to use that line in the debate. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Well, bourgeois democracy's on the ballot, not actual democracy.
yeah. Well, we'll keep the conversation going, Paul, if you don't mind.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be super. So, all right, hang in there. I've got to go take care of some domestic responsibilities before I get in too much
Got
trouble.
it. Thanks for your time. I
And
appreciate
we'll
it, man.
talk. All right, buddy.
I'll talk to you soon.